Struggle. Okay, just a moment. Okay, hi guys, my name is Elizabeth Phillips, and today we're going to talk about the novel Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. It's been a big inspiration to a lot of people. The monster itself said, "I shudder to think that future ages might curse me as their past, whose selfishness has not hesitated to buy its own peace at this price, perhaps of the whole human race." That was said by Frankenstein's monster, to specify the monster. He felt as though he would leave a legacy of terror, which unfortunately his legacy has lived on as more of a horror character. This face is what many people see in their head when they think of classic monsters. The story of Frankenstein, the image of his monster, has inspired countless and lots of artists to create movies, television shows, sculptures, paintings, songs, and more different forms of art. This image in particular is actually from the 1931 Frankenstein movie directed by James Whale. This movie itself has inspired countless pieces of artwork. The 1931 Frankenstein movie was one of the first movie versions of the book. After that, Universal Studios produced 7 sequels to it. Not to mention the dozens of other spin-off movies based on this movie version, such as Young Frankenstein, Blackenstein, Edward Scissorhands, and the Rocky Horror Picture Show have all mentioned it or used the concept. This Frankenstein movie had the same basic story as Mary Shelley's original version versus some of the other movies. It's basically a crazy scientist attempting to create life, but it all goes wrong. James Whale's version is slightly different, though. He constructed the focus of the story from being about creating life to more showing how unforgiving and cruel the human race is to the monster. As many images come to mind of villages of people pillaging the monster and whatnot. James Whale fought in World War I and was taken as a prisoner of war by the Germans. Because of this time he spent in a prison there, it made him see the many terrible things that humans are capable of. When he actually returned from the war, that's when he began to work for Universal Studios to produce the horror films, and eventually decided to produce Frankenstein. And that's how he showed, and throughout all of his movies, and especially Frankenstein, he showed his views on the human race that he saw in the war through adapting the monster's personality, specifically in Frankenstein, to be naturally reckless, versus in the novel where the monster was curious and desperate for love. So in the movie, the monster was when he first was created, he was destroying stuff, and he just wanted to kill. And in the novel, he was looking for love, but eventually realized he could not get it, and that destroyed him. That movie monster version forces the town's people to immediately reject the monster in the movie and become destructive. That's how they're portrayed as unloving and ruthless. Even though they are portrayed as that, Whale's portrayal of the story turned into a classic horror story, and that still sticks with us today. The 1931 Frankenstein story actually inspired many other artists to create things. According to a blog on all things Frankenstein, Thomas Kubler, a sculptor, saw Frankenstein, the 1931 version, as a child, and it left a very fond impression in his mind. As he got older and he began to get more into sculpting, he focused all of his sculptures on really happy moments from his childhood, and he described his art as bringing to life the kind of lore that brought him so much joy as a child. Frankenstein was one of his happy moments, so he decided to depict the monster. As depicting as one of his happiest moments, he also decided to depict the monster in one of his happiest moments. In the movie, the monster befriends a little girl playing with daisies. He feels this brief moment of pure happiness before it's all ripped away when he throws her into the water and she begins to drown. I'll show you a little clip here of that. So load for a second. You'll get a lovely ad.
The price of super fast internet is built to last. Get up to 12 meg high-speed internet for $19.95 a month for 5 years with no term contract when you bundle with unlimited nationwide calling.
Fast forward a bit here for you. Here we're gonna see the monster meeting the girl, the little girl.
It was me. Would you like one of my flowers?
We can see here the pure joy in the monster's face right before he eventually decides to do this.
How mine flow? No, you're hurting me! No!
That brief moment of joy was the most happiness the monster ever really experienced. Kublai chose to show his joy through the monster's happiness. Clearly, James Whale's version of Frankenstein left a large impression on Kubler, and it's also left an impression on other artists like Picasso. This is an unknown painting by Picasso, and it depicts Frankenstein's monster combined with other villains such as Odin and Oedipus. The same blog that gave us the other sculpture shared with us Kubler also reveals that Picasso saw the Frankenstein movie in the cinema as a child. He has associated himself with the monster personally, as they both have issues with their fathers and are sometimes looked at from the public as monsters because of their odd features and personalities, mostly. Because of that, it's believed that this painting is supposed to be somewhat of a self-portrait. Picasso once stated that his work is like a diary. To understand it, you must see how it mirrors life. This painting is a part of him, and that it was inspired by the story of an unloved monster. What's ironic is that some of Picasso's artwork is actually referred to as Frankenstein's art because of the choppy, sewn-together puzzle piece look, which is as the monster was sewn together and is a puzzle himself, practically. It's a little related. Not all artists see a villain within the monster, though. Cartoonist Bob Clampett heard the story of Frankenstein and was inspired to create a cartoon about monsters. The 60s was a time of rebirth for classic horror movies, as Universal Studios hosted Shock Theater, which aired all the old horror movies. Clampett came up with an idea for the Monsters, which was a family of monsters consisting of Dracula and Frankenstein's monster and a werewolf. As it was being produced, there was a lot of controversy over whether or not it should actually be a cartoon. But the Monsters official website told us that producers eventually decided that it should remain a classic sitcom. Herman Munster, the father of the family, is Frankenstein's monster. Herman's background story is the exact one of Frankenstein's monster, according to the official Monsters website again. He also has similar personality qualities, such that he's curious, childish, and easily frustrated. The largest difference is that the adaptation makes the monster a loving father that you can't help but love. The Frankenstein's monster found his way into America's heart through Monsters, thanks to Bob Clampett and his inspiration from classic horror stories like Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. America and the world was able to experience Frankenstein in a different part of pop culture. Carol Decker, the lead singer of T-Pow, watched a documentary on Mary Shelley, Lord Byron, and John Keats one day. She became fascinated with Shelley's success, but also how her success had led to such problems in her personal life. Basically, Shelley had created her own personal monster in her own life, like Frankenstein had created. Through Shelley's story, Decker formed the idea that you should be careful what you wish for just in case you get it. Decker related Shelley's story to that of Dr. Frankenstein in a way that they both wanted something so badly that when they got it, it was a disaster. For Frankenstein, that was a dream of creating life, but instead he created a monster. The song kind of speaks about the story of the monster, Dr. Frankenstein, and Shelley. The first verses speak of how the monster could not control its natural destructive self, also about it speaks of Dr. Frankenstein's greediness for his dreams, and it also talks about Decker sings about the ignorant, childish side of the monster and his ignorant dreams for being loved. The chorus wraps everything up with, "Don't push too far, your dreams are china in your hand." And I'm gonna play you a little bit of that. Sorry, just a moment here. Oops. The beginning of the song has sort of a horror movie feel to it in itself, with a little creepiness.
Take a life on up to the second birth, and then we sing to me.
You can see right there that even that in the beginning it was, as these lyrics say here, it was a theme she had and a scheme he had told in a foreign land. It's beginning to talk about Mary Shelley's idea for the story of Frankenstein. So basically, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein created a lot of inspiration for other pieces of artwork. The monster's legacy is continuing to live on and inspire more people, and it will always live as a classic horror monster that we all know and love. And here's a little bit of my works cited, and there's a little bit more. Thanks so much.